Okay, hello everybody. This is a very important day. This is National Voter Registration Day. And so our numbers may be smaller today because a lot of people are helping to get people registered. So I'm going to ask Barbara to tell us about an event at 4 o'clock, Barbara. The League of Pfizer.
At Pfizer, there's a the registration, voting registration. I'm not sure what else. I was announcing that to our membership committee yesterday to encourage them to go and just mingle and meet people and tell them about the league, which obviously is very necessary. People need to know that and build relationships.
And another event is going on at Sherman Phoenix. And I'm thinking it starts at 4 o'clock. I know I'm going at 8 p.m. So we'll see how late people are registering people to vote. We've been in libraries and seen all the support they're getting and giving for helping get out the vote. At the moment, my husband is at West Campus registering students for MATC. And it's so sweet. He's a really helpful man. And so they're probably sick of seeing me tell them, have you registered to vote? Would you like to take some to your class? So now I've got another face helping us. So any other public announcements of community events or ways that we can help register people to vote?
If I may step in,
Please.
The League of Women Voters and Coalition, including NAACP and Building Unity, that happens at 6 o'clock. It happens tonight at 6 o'clock, Ms. Pat.
And where are they going to be, Rhonda?
No Studios area in Sherman, Phoenix.
Okay, that's 6 o'clock. All right, great.
Then in your text message, you have the information about the League of Women Voters and the MPL, if you want to read that.
Right.
I just said.
Thank you. Another event coming on Saturday is sort of an interfaith event sponsored by Souls to the Polls and Pastors United. And so that event is a powerful lunch and it starts at 11:30 and it goes to 1:30. It is at MATC in the main building on the 6th floor, room 6. It's called M for main building, M605. So if you're going to go to that one, if you text me, I can give you the information on who to call from Souls to the Polls so that they know you're coming. Miranda, your hand is up. So welcome people who have joined us. We are just doing community and league announcements before we welcome Kai, who is having a few challenges with technology, but hopefully all will go well. Rhonda, did you want to add something?
Well, in addition, on Saturday, there's so much going on Saturday. There's also a Governor Evers, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, and other members of our legislative leadership going to be at community brainstorming at the African American Women's Center. I don't have the exact time, but I will send the information to you, Pat.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to welcome everybody. And I see we have 2 people who are muted and I am not sure if they wanted to add any announcements before we begin. If you do, just unmute and we can get going. Okay. All right. I am very happy to recommend and to enjoy the company of Kai Mishlove. And I got to know Kai when we both served together on the Interfaith Conference executive team. And from the first meeting, she landed on her feet, prepared, running. And as people were telling me during the meeting the other day and with this great smile. So Kai, you have warmed many hearts and you have earned the respect of the Jewish community and the interfaith community. And then sadly, we had to say goodbye to you. But happy for the state of Wisconsin. So Kai, you could tell us about your new job with Jewish Social Services and anything else you wanted to do.
Thank you. So first, I want to thank you for having me here today. And I hope that I'm a little discombobulated because I've got a camera one place. Everything's sort of like jerry-rigged here in the office. So I apologize if I'm not looking directly at you because it's in a different area. But I just want to say thank you for having me today. As Pat welcomed me, my name is Kai. I am currently the Executive Director of Jewish Social Services based in Madison. I work for JSS is our acronym. And basically, this is an organization that provides, that resettles actually refugees. And we also work with the elderly, with seniors, with all, sorts of different vulnerable populations. And we do it through a Jewish lens, evoking themes common within Judaism, such as helping the stranger, repairing the world, doing things with chesed, which means loving kindness in Hebrew. It's very important to give tzedakah, which is charity in Judaism. And so this is a part of that. And it's also very important to always look for ways to bring zedek, justice, to the work. So that's what I'm doing. I'm brand new here. I've been here for about 2 weeks. I moved from Milwaukee to Madison. I lived in Milwaukee for about 10 years. I was formerly the Jewish Community Relations Council Director for the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. So in this work, I'm working within representing the Jewish community, evoking Jewish values, but also my background is in medical social work, case management, legal services, working with all sorts of vulnerable communities. My goal is to always empower communities that I work with, and to do that from a lens that is that sees inclusivity is very important. Equity, inclusivity, and diversity are very much a part of my work and what I feel is my life mission as a woman who is a woman of color, a Black woman who is also a Jewish woman, who is also a woman of who's a mother to a child who's disabled, who's an adult now. So I look at things through very many different lenses. Many of us have many different identities that we bring to the world, that the world is gifted with. And, it's my hope that the world welcomes us to do this work. So that's a little bit about me. And I have a PowerPoint today where I wanted to discuss with you what it's like to be a transformational leader. I think that's very important for all of us in the work. I know the work that all of you are doing and in our day-to-day lives. So I'm going to try, keep my fingers crossed. I'm going to try to share my screen.
So I'm looking at something from my end. It says, allow Zoom to share your screen. How do I get it so that you can do it?
That's a good
Add her,
question. Let's see.
add her as a co-host, Miss Pat.
Okay, so going in, and I do that through participants? No?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's
And then you-
done. It's showing.
It's showing?
Oh,
Is,
good.
is the PowerPoint showing? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
Oh
thank
my
you.
gosh, we get the gold star. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. So a big part of transformational leadership is really navigating challenges without fear. So that's the title of my presentation. So, and is everyone seeing it? Are we on the second slide? What is leadership?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay, great. So when you think about what leadership is, and you think about management of that, you think about all of these like concentric circles, right? You want to, as a leader, you want to be able to instill an inspiring vision. You want to also, on the management side, instill good operational processes. And in the middle of this, hopefully by doing all of this, you also are able to get important things done. And so when we're thinking about a leader, what's effective, what, all of the different things in your minds, what are you thinking about in your leadership? Or what do you see as important for a leader? Where have you seen situations where especially women leaders have been able to be effective or get their voices heard or get things done. Does anyone want to jump in with any examples?
It's a
What's
great place to
inspiring
jump
you
in
to
because
do?
these are some feisty women who are with us.
Good. And it
Now,
can
now,
be anybody,
but
anybody.
now
It can
that
be
she
your
said
grandma.
feisty, I don't know if I want to talk. Okay, no, I'm joking. For me, this is Elizabeth. One of the places that it can be done is in the church, but
Mhm,
I'm so glad that you gave those 3 criteria for
mhm,
what leadership is.
mhm,
And without going into the full story, and Patricia is privy to this, even when you are in let me say it this way, in a leadership position, you have to be able to identify the skills and talents that people bring to your organization.
mhm,
That's one piece of it.
mhm,
What I'm running into now, and I always like to use quotes from the Bible. So my paraphrase is going to be, the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few.
Mm,
And what I'm running into right now as I'm trying to plan for 2023
mhm,
activities,
mhm,
people are saying to me, I'm not one of those who can step out in the front and lead. I
mhm,
will give you all the help that you need from the background, but when I try and lead, it raises my anxiety levels.
mhm,
And I had a conversation with someone today who turned me down, for a
mhm,
position. But after she recognized the impact on her mental health, I said, I
mhm,
can't fight you on this one.
mhm.
And she said, pray for me. And I said, yes, I will.
And these are some of the things that I go over in this PowerPoint. Folks who feel comfortable to lead, folks who don't. And what I'm concerned about is structures that prevent people from leading, ways in which voices are not heard or not elevated. And I think it's important as women, we're often sometimes, depending on the culture, seen in a supportive role and not necessarily in a leadership role. So how do we mitigate that? How do we navigate that? And how do we make it possible for all of us to lead?
So Kai, I'll jump in.
Uh-huh.
I would say without false humility that I have practiced being a leader since 7th grade.
Mhm,
And what has inspired me is a dedication to social justice. And
mhm,
so when I have that shy feeling, or if there is something that's interfering with my confidence, I tell myself it's not about me, it's about what I'm trying to achieve. And so I kind of take myself out of that nervous place that Liz just described.
yeah,
And it's the love of action, of inspiring action and nurturing the spirit while we step forward. And so I nurture my own spirit as well by doing what I love with the people I love in the places I love.
mhm,
And that energy helps me propel past the obstacles.
mhm. That's a good point. Does anybody else want to add anything? I was going to say something about imposter syndrome.
Tell
Oh,
us
yeah,
about that.
yeah.
Sometimes, particularly, women who are from disenfranchised, communities. Being a woman's disenfranchising itself, but then if you've got an added layer due to language, ethnicity, maybe disability, that sort of thing, sometimes you can feel like you don't belong. And the system sometimes makes that, enhances that. The system sets it up where you don't belong because of placing barriers there and not looking at you fully for the gifts that you're bringing.
Mhm.
And so we internalize it. Mhm.
And then this is Barbara. and also I'm coming from where Liz is, the church, as a pastor. And then when you move forward, then there's always that kind of backlash that
Yes.
you need to be ready for. And kind
Yeah.
of at one point, we ended up with all women. I was the pastor, the assisting minister was a female,
Mhm.
those helping with communion reading, everywhere. And somebody remarked, oh, it's all women up there. I mean, now got a little snarky and said, well, I'll worry about that when all women have been up there as long as it's been all men.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. Yes.
But
Yes.
in a certain context, I can do that off to the
Yeah.
side, not the whole thing. But so there is that backlash that we have to.
Mhm. Mhm. Did anyone else have anything to share before I move to the next slide? Okay. Thank you. All right. So this is part of what I was talking about, what makes a good leader, the ability to do an ongoing assessment and action. So you see, for anyone who's a climber, I'm not one, but I admire them. I think about, this person here, this woman, how she's navigating things. She's got the rope, she's got what she's climbing, she's got these little crevices and stuff. So she's got to make an assessment as she's going on. What she's in right now, the process may look differently if she were at the bottom. So as she's ascending, there are different things, different, situations she has to mitigate, analyze, and figure out how to troubleshoot. So I think, maybe the rope needs to be tighter. Maybe the angle at which she places her foot needs to be handled differently. Maybe what she's seeing here at the top at her eye level may not be what she's seeing above that or to the side of it. Does she have a 360-degree awareness of what she needs, of all of the issues, so that she can make an accurate assessment? So now when we're looking about transformational leadership, I'm looking at these different categories. Are you able to navigate change? As she's climbing and she sees that there's a hole that's maybe a little smaller than she thought, how can she adapt? How she approaches that, as she's ascending? Are we open to welcoming change? Sometimes people are afraid of change because of something that they perceive may be potentially lost or gained. And you see this a lot of times in organizations when new leadership comes, that there may be a little bit of pushback because people are so used to doing things a certain way, and they're afraid of thinking outside of that box. And I always say, just because something has been prescribed in the past, does that mean that it's set in stone? How can we think about things outside of the boxes that we sometimes place ourselves in? So is there a willingness? How can we avoid silo thinking? Sometimes when you've got I thought about Milwaukee in this way. We have a lot of nonprofits that are doing the same thing, but they don't collaborate or talk with each other. So they're stuck in their silo thinking, or they may be thinking, oh, I'm only working on this issue. There's no reason for me to collaborate with you on your issue because I don't see them as the same. But there may be some commonality there. So we always have to think about how can we avoid silo thinking. Just because I'm covered under this grant and you're covered under that grant doesn't mean that we can't work together if we're working on a common goal. What are those common goals? Are we willing to work with supporters and detractors? Sometimes people will say, I can't work with that person because maybe they don't have the same political philosophy that I have. They're not from the same background, or I may perceive them as an enemy. And I always say, you know what? We have more friends than we have enemies. It's finding that commonality so that you can move to that point. Sometimes the folks that don't agree with you, if you're not willing to meet with them to try to figure out, maybe there's something that they're seeing that you're not seeing. Sometimes a detractor can sink your ship. So it's important to always be willing to think outside of the box, work with people that you may initially think are not in agreement with you, but your greatest enemy today can be your greatest friend tomorrow. And your greatest friend today can be your greatest enemy tomorrow. So I always say, think outside of the box for ways to mitigate all of this. So when I'm speaking about Jewish communal spaces, that's because that's what I'm in. I think about some of the current challenges that we have, and I think other faith groups are facing these challenges too. Demographic challenges, who's in our community? We have we have folks who may be a certain age who might have been in power, and we have younger people coming up who may not be from that same demographic, but they have, differences of thinking. Our community, Jewish community and other communities are becoming more and more diverse. I always say we were always diverse, but it's just that that's not what was projected. There were some misconceptions. But in Judaism, if you're looking in the Bible and you're looking in the Torah, there are so many examples of the Hebrew nation being diverse. And I think about, when I'm thinking about in a non-religious standpoint, when I think about groups such as the Urban League or the NAACP, or even, I ask folks to look at the League of Women Voters. What are your demographics? Are there younger women that you're bringing in? I know when I look at some organizations, whether they be in the Jewish community, the Black community, or other communities, and when we're looking at the structures of power within those organizations, they tended to be a certain age group. So when I look at, for example, the NAACP, I went to an event a couple of years ago and I looked around the room at everyone that was there at the banquet, and they were all of a certain generation. I'd say everyone was 50 and above. And all I could think of is, how are you going to bring in newer, younger people? Are the issues that you're looking at, are they speaking to younger people? How can we connect the old guard with the new guard? Because there are things to be learned from your predecessors, from the ancestors. There are things to be learned, and there are things to be learned with the young people coming up. When I think about Black Lives Matter and some of the things that they were doing to bring about change, that was a little different than what other groups were doing previously. So what can we learn from that? And how can we bridge groups, that are working on these issues? I think about funding challenges. COVID threw us all for a loop, right? There were challenges before then because there was disparity that existed before then. But then with COVID, everything was turned upside down. Things that we thought we couldn't do, such as some organizations thought that you couldn't have workers working remotely, they would not do their work. They were all of a sudden forced to handle this and to allow this. And now as we're coming back, people are thinking, maybe there is a way that I can save money if people are working from home. I'm using that as an example. Maybe we don't have to have an office. Maybe it's cheaper to do it this way. And then I think about funding challenges where a lot of money might have been diverted to one thing that might have been an emergency, and funding went away from other things. So I know that I was looking at a project. I was talking to a funder in another city, an organization in another city, and they told me that once folks started working on DEI things, funding was taken away from senior stuff, senior programming, and in that city. And all I could think of is, well, first of all, DEI is seniors are a part of DEI. There are people who are from communities of color who are a part of the senior community. So why is it that that funder could not look at things in a holistic way, in an integrative way? It doesn't have to be compartmentalized. There are times when things need to be, so that you address the issues that need to be, discussed and changed, but it doesn't have to be an either or. It can be an and. And then there are philosophical challenges that I know that I face of who is this, who is that, in the Jewish community, who is Jewish, what the Jewish community looks like. And I know that this is being discussed in other faith communities also, thinking about what is our mission. If you think about in communities of color, let's look at the Black Lives Matter platform versus the NAACP platform. There's a philosophical, difference there. How can we look at every challenge as an opportunity for growth? It doesn't have to be a negative.
Could I jump in? 'Cause what you just said inspired me to share. Joanne Williams did a documentary, and I just saw it on Thursday night, and it was called The Exchange in White America, Kaukana and King. 50
Mm.
years later. And it was a film exploring the student exchange between Kaukauna, Wisconsin High School and Rufus King High School. And it was just a wonderful
Yes.
experience, because what you were talking about, the demographic changes, the
Mhm.
funding challenges, the philosophical, you know, to see how Black Lives Matter compares to what the young folks, and I was young back then too, what we were doing in 1966, 1967. It's just very reflective and thoughtful. And I'm not sure how we can make that available, but if you ever get the chance to see that documentary, I highly recommend it. It really
What's the
backs
name
up
of
what
it?
I just said.
What's-
Yeah, I'm pulling it up on my document here. It was called Exchange in White America
By Joanne Williams.
by
I-
Joanne
I-
Williams.
Yeah, I don't have to see it. I lived it, so you know.
Yes, you did.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Kaukauna and King, 50
Mhm.
years later. And the film explores a student exchange between Kaukauna and Rufus King. And one of the encouraging things about seeing this documentary was people felt accepted. Kaukauna people who came to King, they felt accepted by the family they lived with. And the students from Rufus King who moved to Kaukauna, they felt like they were treated kindly. And so this exchange had great positive outcome. I just
Mhm.
wish we had more opportunity
Yes,
for that.
yeah. No, I mean, that sounds great. A lot of times, I think we don't know each other, and there's so many stereotypes and that are purposely put out there to
Oh, yeah.
frighten people. So, I've been to Kaukauna, it's there's a racetrack up there. I used to be really into motorcycle racing. So I would go up there and I'd be like the only person of color that I could see anywhere around. And all I could think of is, and people were very nice to me, but all I could think of is, I may be the only Black person they've ever met that wasn't the scary Black person that's portrayed in the media. That's what is portrayed often. If you look at the news, if you look at the newspapers, and I know Liddy is a journalist, so she can
Yep.
speak a lot about this, stereotypes that are promoted that are racist, that are designed to keep communities apart, to keep communities from understanding each other. And it's very, very, detrimental, and it prevents our society from reaching DEI goals and from being a truly equitable society that transforms the lives of its inhabitants.
Thank you.
All right. How do we remain relevant in competing challenges? I always think that's this is an important slide. You look at all of these like pins and how they're all kind of like tangled up, and some of them are on one side of the ribbon and others are on the others. And so when I think about this, I think about being in the middle, trying to figure out what's the most important goal to accomplish while I'm dealing with these competing challenges of issues in the society. I picked this issue, but there might be another issue that's affecting that issue, right? Taking care of myself, taking care of my community, taking care of my family. These are all competing challenges. How do you remain a leader, but at the same time, take care of yourself? We don't want everybody to sacrifice themselves, because that's not going to help any of us. The same issue that you were trying to work on is going to still remain with you not being here. So what can we do to deal with these competing challenges? You should always be taking care of your family, taking care of yourself. That's a part of this work. And, sometimes I talk to folks who are activists for whom this is a real challenge. They're out there taking care of the world, and they're not able to take care of their families. And so there's this back and forth, so how can we do that? You don't want to be the leader where your child is neglected and turns out to write a tell-all biography about what a horrible, parent you were. And I've seen that happen before, So how do we remain relevant for ourselves, for our community, for our society? this is a picture, oops, the picture, oh, let me go back to that. This is a picture that I thought was important because I'm afraid of heights. And it was a big challenge for me to climb. This was in Red Rock Canyon in Las Vegas. And it took a lot for me to get up to that point, to even be able to, like, you know, not want to hug the rock, you know. I'm actually balancing. So, you know, I bring that up there just to tell you what my journey has been of really finding the parts of my personality that could help me with the confidence to overcome challenges that I might face. Now, this is an important part of this presentation because it speaks a lot to me in my leadership. What does it mean to be a transformational leader as a woman who is GMI? Does anyone know what GMI means? Okay. GMI means global majority indigenous. Now, this term does not center whiteness, and that's why I use this term. So I'm a woman, when I say woman of color, that term is looked at in a way that centers whiteness because it's separating me. People don't realize people who are of color are the majority in this world. So I say this as a way, and other people have said that there's a whole movement around this, as a way to reclaim who we are in this world, reclaiming power. So I'm a member of the global majority indigenous community. Women who are of the global majority indigenous have special considerations when you're talking about navigating systems of power and navigating our space in the world. Often women from this community are at the forefront of social movements, often overworked, underpaid, and underacknowledged. And I'm sorry, I just see a typo there. It should have been overworked. And I'm using here for this title of this, I wanted to use this woman. Everybody knows who this is, right? Or do you, if you don't? Okay.
Yes.
Ruby Bridges.
Yes.
Think about her as a little girl being the face of desegregation. This is a child when most children her age would have been thinking about what it means to be a child, you know, play with dolls, play with trucks, you know, whatever it means to be a child, you know, when am I going to get my next popsicle, whatever, you know, that sort of, when is, you know, mom or dad going to allow me to, you know, play in the garden or learn how, or lick the spoon, you know, how baking a cake. When am I going to, you know, am I going to get jacks and the ball and jacks? If you remember ball and jacks, that game, that was my favorite game.
Mine too.
Yeah. So thinking about that, and here she is really transforming the world by her bravery. And I think about when I was growing up, I learned about Ruby Bridges, but I never knew what happened to her after that. This is Ruby Bridges as an adult. She's in her, I think, late 60s now. Was she ever given the respect that she was due during that time and throughout the years? So I bring her up as an example. Another woman of the GMI who we don't talk enough about, Harriet Tubman, right? I think there were at least 13 different missions that she went on. Imagine, you know, negotiating the path for freedom of slaves on the Underground Railroad when anybody could turn you in at any moment. I mean, imagine that bravery. Is she spoken about enough? You know, when I think about women within our Native American community, are they spoken about? The leaders within those communities over, you know, generations, are they spoken about? When I think about women across the world, women who are transforming environmental, you know, the preservation of our environment, are they spoken enough about? And there are women in countries in Africa and Latin America who are doing this work, but they never get the recognition. Now, here's a slide I want to see. Does anyone know who this is? Yeah, no one knows who this is, right? She is the co-founder, the majority co-founder, I almost want to call her founder, of Black Lives Matter,
I thought
Alicia
so.
Garza. Do you know that Alicia Garza is Jewish? A lot of people don't know that. The founder of Black Lives Matter is a Jewish woman of the global majority. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts about how you can support women like myself, women who are from the global majority, Indigenous. First of all, reminding all of us, radical self-care. Radical self-care is not just for someone of the upper middle class community, it's for all of us, taking care of ourselves, encouraging. A lot of times in the GMI community, it's almost because of the society in which we live in, where women will work themselves to the bone because it's instilled in us through culture and through stimuli from the outer world, that we need to work to do everything that we need to do, that our survival depends on it. You think about the women of slave women who were the wet nurses, right? For the slave owners, the wives of the slave owners, right? Or the women, they were slave owners too. So these are women who were taking care of the master's babies, right, as the wet nurse, and not able to take care of their own children, right? So, but they were taking care of their children when they could. So when was there time for, when did that woman have time for herself? And I know I'm looking at something that's extreme, because I'm looking at slavery where you're chattel, so you're never going to be able to take care of yourself anyway, because that's not the way the system is set up for you. But I'm thinking about now in this day and age, how do we encourage radical self-care, especially among women from the GMI community? How are we disrupting erasure? How are we keeping the memory of women leaders from these communities alive? Are you sharing the mic? Are you passing the mic? If you're a woman of privilege and influence, are you sharing that influence and that privilege? So for example, I went to an event where they were speaking about the challenges affecting, and they called it people of color, right? The challenges affecting people of color. Not one person on that panel was from that community. Not one person on that panel was from a community that would be considered of color. What does that tell you? You're erasing those voices because you're promoting your own voice. So make sure that you're working in partnership, being an ally. A true ally means that you are an ally, not that you're the director of the film. You're an ally, allowing that person to lead. If that's an issue that they are leading on that affects their community, the community should be leading themselves with you finding ways to support that community. Elevating leadership. Every time that you can, elevate the leadership. Look at within your own organizations, are they promoting and recruiting people from diverse backgrounds to come in and do that work? Or are you only promoting folks that are within your circle that look like you? Think about that. Elevate leader. Really, people of the global majority are really in the majority. So that should be reflected in leadership. Listen. Sometimes it's very painful to listen to someone's trauma. And sometimes it gets tangled up in your own trauma, where you're coming from, because we're all coming from trauma of some type. So make sure that you listen, you don't dominate the conversation, and there are things to be learned. There are things, I'll give you an example. I'm not from a refugee background, but I worked with refugees for many, many years, and I still do. So I may not have been from that background speaking that language, but I made sure to make sure that space was held for them to tell their story if they wanted to. And it was not for me to tell their story, but it was for me to support them in the world hearing that story and to help support them in whatever way they needed to heal from that, with them directing it, not with me suggesting this is what you need, but with me saying, okay, how can I support you? Sometimes people don't think about that. If you're I'm thinking about voting rights right now. If you're going to support Black leaders, organizing for change, or, XYZ organization, if you want to support the AAPI, community, if you want to support the Latinx community, whatever, first thing you should say to them is, what do you need? How can I support you? What is your vision? Not coming in like the savior to direct everything. And that's what we need to, and we need to get away from that in charity also. I see a lot of that with the charitable organizations where they want to give the money and they want to direct, the work. And that's not a functional, situation. It's not going to change anything. It's just going to reinforce systems that keep people from, being elevated. And then always disrupt the commodifying of production over self-care, over the gift of the person. Sometimes, especially in communities that, are dealing with levels of oppression, we're looking, and in the general society also, outside of that, subgroup, we value people over what they can produce. Can you, we're not a factory. That's what I say. Our lives should not be factories. It should not be about how many, you got to measure your outcomes, you got to measure your goals, but it should not be about how many, I'll give you an example, how many events I scheduled for the year. How many, and I call that performative allyship. I don't want to say I want to partner with the AAPI community and make it something where I'm just going to schedule a bunch of events and that's how I'm going to judge my success. That doesn't mean that we achieved any goals to support that community or to build a bridge between my community and that community. It only means that we were good at being an event planner. And that should not be something that we should judge someone's self-worth on. And, and beyond that, self-care should be looked at as a commodity. It should be something that's good because it helps you. If you're able to take rest when you need it, rest is sacred. In Judaism, we have something called Shabbat, where you are supposed to take that time to regroup, to reevaluate your past week, to think about your future week, and to just disconnect yourself from all of the things that keep us from seeing the world as it is, from seeing our value in the world, and from seeing each other. And let's always remember that we all bring gifts to this work. We're a gift. Everybody on this call is a gift. The work that you're doing is hard work, and it means that as hard as you are doing this work, as hard as you're working, you should be playing just as hard so that you preserve yourself for the long run, right? And then these are a couple of books that I thought might be good for people to read. What the Changing Landscape Is of Leadership, How to Embrace the Term Global Majority, and exploring stories of, and I use this as an example because I am a Black woman, of Black women empowered. And these are just some, there's just a few that kind of crossed my mind this morning. It's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure everybody has a list of things. And maybe, I don't know if, Pat, maybe if you could send out that reading list, and I can always send more stuff. And then I want to close with this. This is a saying in Judaism. It's from Perkei, I believe. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. The most important thing is to not be afraid. Let courage lead you every day. And you know what I mean by the world being a narrow bridge. You can easily fall off. I mean, there are different ways to look at this metaphor. You can easily fall off. You're on a narrow bridge, but I look at that metaphor also. It's narrow in that we've got 0 degrees of separation between us. And that's what I think about when I think about this metaphor. And I also think about when you've got a goal in mind, and I take this from motorcycle racing and also bicycle racing. They always tell you not to have target fixation. If you are focusing on the object that you want to avoid when you are racing, you will crash into it. So it's always important to have 360 degrees awareness around you. Look at the road ahead of you, not focusing on what you want to avoid, but focus on where you want to go. And I say that a lot when I look at politics. Sometimes I see people getting caught up in who they're fighting with and not doing enough work on where they want to go. So then you get caught in the weeds. You fall off and you get caught in the weeds of what you're trying to avoid instead of planning ahead. And that's a proactive thing too. So thank you.
Oh, my goodness, Kai.
Thank you. And you know what? I'm looking at this. I tried to edit, but I must not have saved it. My new email address. This is my personal email address.
Yes.
My work email address is Kai Mishlove at jssmadison.org. I'm trying to see if I can put this in the chat somehow. Maybe if I stop sharing.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, now I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you. So I want to open it up, and if you want to add something to what you heard that Kai inspired you, if you have a question, this is a Q&A time. And okay, it looks like Elizabeth is ready.
I would like for her to repeat the quote. The whole world is a very narrow bridge.
Yes, it's the whole world is a very narrow bridge. The most important thing is to not be afraid.
And I see a big smile on Liddy's face, like, yeah, go get him.
Yes, I was a young UWM journalist was interviewing me yesterday. And I told her to read and listen and don't be scared. She said, what? I said, scared. And I said, scared. She said, oh, I'm going to take that. I said, yeah, don't be scared.
Any other comments? Barbara?
Well, thank you. That was really good stuff. Some of it, yeah, a long time ago. Some really, the GMI thing is really helpful. I just want to say where I kind of connect, and I've said this to several people in the group. The one thing I did in my last congregation, I had a vision that this be the church where God's diversity works.
Mm.
Because it is already God's diversity, and we're just trying to make it work. And kind of what I mean by that, and you can use that phrase without any religious reference, just let's be the place where diversity works, and I see that in the league that we're trying to do that, not just to look good, get diversity, to look, pretty, as they say, they have all these different faces, but is everyone included in the room where it happens? In making decisions, are we truly listening, as you said, and things like that. So that's kind of where I take on that.
That is so true.
Well,
One more comment.
yes, please.
This was very informative and good. And it also hit on some of the things from our DEI meeting last night in terms of strategic planning. So we will probably have to have you come to one of our meetings and share some more information.
I agree. I was thinking the same thing, Liz. I really appreciated a lot of what you were talking about, and I'd like to have more from you.
For me?
Yeah.
You
Okay,
come.
thank you.
We
I'm
know
sorry.
that you're going to come to Milwaukee sometimes.
Yeah, I come to Milwaukee frequently. I've lived there so long. I still see myself as I used to see myself as a transplant from Chicago. It was hard for me to accept that I lived in Milwaukee. And then when I moved to Madison, now I see myself as a transplant from Milwaukee. So yeah, anything that I can do to help. And I can also send people your way, because I'm not a DEI facilitator, but I have facilitated for Nurturing Diversity Partners. I don't know if you know Fran Kaplan and Reggie.
Oh, yeah.
Jackson.
Yeah.
Their organization, they are wonderful.
Mhm.
And so anything I can do to help. But I want you to know the quote that I mentioned, the whole world is a very narrow bridge. The most important thing is to not be afraid. That is a quote by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, of blessed memory. He is not here. He has not been here for generations. He passed away a long time ago, but that's a quote from him. So just so you know.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Rhonda, you have your hand up?
Want to agree with both Miss Liz and Miss Nancy. I served on the state DEI committee, and a lot of what you talked about in terms of becoming an ally, I'm using my own words, of course, being relational instead of being transactional in our interactions. Those are things that I can say that the league is committed to trying to integrate.
Mhm.
So when you say that you're not sure if you would fit into this particular path, I'd say that you're exactly the voice we need to hear, because you do offer so many different lenses that you project, and you do so well at helping us to stretch our vision and seeing ourselves outside of ourselves. I just want to say thank you. We're doing some youth programming, and I can see where you could just be on the Zoom and talking to our youth about some of the struggles that they've had in amplifying their voices, so I think you're transgenerational. And I
Mhm.
think that the things that you have are very relevant to where we're all at, where we're trying to stretch and grow and do that self-care thing, girl, and do that self-care thing. So thank you for
Thank
this
you.
opportunity. Thank you, Pat, for bringing me back into the fold here at the league. This has been just, I can't wait to connect with you again. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to connect with all of you all. And thank you, Rhonda. I can't wait to, stay in touch.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One more comment.
Sure.
And Patricia, this is a thank you to you.
Mhm.
And I want to explain it. And anybody else could say the same thing. But for those of us who are in the swamp of this work, it's so good to have
Mhm.
encouragement
Mhm.
and reminders. And it makes me think of this song that says, sometimes you have to encourage yourself. And she's reminded us that
Yes.
we have to do that. And one of the reasons for the group that I'm personalizing this to Patricia is last night, after I was dealing with something, I said to her, I'm just going to go to bed now. And, in other words, tomorrow is another day. The problem will still be there,
Yes.
but I need that restorative rest.
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
yes.
Totally agree. Totally agree. They never wrote on anyone's tombstone. They were such a great worker. You know what
How
I'm
many
saying?
meetings did they make?
Right.
Yes.
How many? Right. And I want to also give a special appreciation to Pat also, because all of the work, I'm going to give you an example. Pat is a true ally. There were times that I had, where I wasn't sure what was going on in the room when we sat in meetings. And Pat would always give me advice and also a perspective, and would also encourage my leadership. I was new coming in, so I didn't know all of the players. And I felt from the moment I met Pat that Pat was an ally, that Pat cared, and that Pat really, really had a vision that was bigger than where we were at. So I have to thank you, Pat. Thank you for inviting me. And I also want to thank everybody here, because I know I don't know everybody here on this call, but I'm grateful to have spent this time with you. And I want to know more about everybody on the call. Is there a way I can get involved? That sort of thing. Meetup. Do you ever have meetups? Do you ever have teas where we exchange ideas? Or maybe because of COVID, we're on, Zoom right now. But I'd like to know how to remain in touch.
That's so generous of you. Thank you, Kai.
Yes.
When we heard she was moving to Madison, it was a three hanky announcement for me. It's like, oh no, oh no. I try to be generous about how the refugees, and I have so much respect for the JCC, the JSS. I like the JCC too, but the JSS for the work you've been doing, especially with Afghan. And yesterday on the news, I heard that there is something called jail to deportation pipeline. And they talked about Walworth County and Waukesha County, where they make a deal, the sheriffs make a deal that they are going to bust that person, get them in jail, and the sheriffs profit by keeping the person in jail so that they can be deported. And if that happens, money comes to the sheriff and to their department. And it was like, Lord have mercy. I mean, it's just like every time you hear something, you're like, now what do we do? Now
Right,
what do we do?
right. If you could send me that information, because I hadn't heard of that, I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
Yes,
You know?
could you?
it was on public radio on I think at 12 noon, maybe on like Lake Effect. And it was yesterday.
Oh, wow.
I will try to.
That sounds like legalized trafficking.
Yeah,
sure
it does sound like
does.
legalized
Sure
trafficking.
does.
And, you know, our immigration policy, there's so much we need to work on of who
Right.
is accepted and who isn't.
Yeah.
You know, I think about the pictures of the Haitian, you know, they were refugees. They didn't have refugee status under the UNHCR, United Nations, you know, status of, you know, criteria, but they are. And so when you see the pictures of them being whipped on horses, do you remember that back in, what was that, May? At the
Definitely.
border, southern border. And then when I look at how, you know, folks, you know, how we welcomed Ukraine, and I'm not trying to say anything,
Right.
the people who are from Ukraine have suffered.
Yeah.
And, you know, so at this agency, I have to accept whoever comes through and help them. I'm looking at them as an individual. We don't make immigration policy. Here, we just accept who comes our way and we try to, you know, take care of that person. And I really do look at each person individually. But when I was in Mexico in May, on the border and on the other side in Mexico. And what I saw in those migrant camps, I will never forget. Most of the people in those migrant camps, and when I say camps, I'm talking about people sleeping on rocks with like like the cheapest tent you could find at the dollar store or the Walmart. That was their only shelter. These were people who were Afro-Latino. They were from Honduras. They were from Central America. They were Haitian. They were Dominican, and they were stuck there. And they were deporting them. They were there for a little bit of time, maybe for 24 hours, and then they were being sent back to where they came from. And they were prey for human traffickers and the cartels.
Yeah.
I'll never forget visiting one camp, and they told us, the guide said, we may have to leave quickly because the cartel is circling.
Oh.
They've been kidnapping children, raping women. If I say we have to go, I give you the signal, you got to go. So, you know, I'm thinking about, here I am with protection, and these people don't have any protection. And look who's in those camps. Nobody's talking about who's in those camps on the border. And that it's not illegal for them to arrive at that camp. They should be allowed to file for asylum.
Definitely. I have 3 grandchildren, and I had a picture in one of my books that they were going through the other day. And, you know, it's like Facebook, and then you turn it into a photo book. And the 3 kids were looking at the kids in cages. Yeah. And, you know, that was their movement first.
Yes.
When they knew they had to keep working for justice.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of those kids, there was a little ring going of kids who were separated from their families, placed with adoption agencies, couples, you know, this was cheaper.
Right.
To adopt your child through this way instead of going, you know, spending thousands if you're going to do it overseas. There was a whole system that was benefiting from this. And some of those kids have never been reunited, and some rights were terminated prematurely because the parents didn't provide language support for those parents, translation. There's all sorts of awful things that happen. And it's coming out now, the sexual abuse also, that some of those kids suffered while they were in, detention. Imagine if it's a pedophile's playground. Think about that. You have all, with nobody watching what's going on.
Well, I bless you,
Thank you.
Kai. I bless you. I hold you and yours in the light. And may I ask, could we be forever friends?
Yes, please, please. That would be an honor for me.
Okay.
And
Thank
I
you.
got to give a fellow shout out to Liddy, another
Yeah.
Jewish woman of color on the call. I can't see everybody because it's squares that are, for some, but thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Kai, I'll teach you really fast a trick that someone taught me. When you're on your phone, if you go like this, and then if you swipe, you can see more people on the square of a Zoom call. So if you take it and you swipe it, did that increase the number of people you could see?
No,
Oh, darn.
maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Well, we'll have to practice on that one.
Okay.
Anyway,
We'll set up a Zoom to practice.
I thank you, my strong, loving women. And now let's try to stay playful.
Thank you, Pat.
And
Thank you,
self-care.
Pat. Thank you, Kai.
That was great.
Thank you, Kai.
Well, everyone.
Peace.
Peace. Let's register those voters.
Yes, yes.